Hey there, welcome to the Author's Way podcast, the journey to finding your voice. My name is Jennifer Wright. I am your podcast host, and I am very excited about the guest we have today. His name is Dr. Anthony Perdue. And full disclosure, Anthony and I used to work together. So we met, gosh, it was over 20 years ago. We worked together. Anthony was a consultant that was working with the company I was working for at the time. And he's written actually two books. We're going to talk about the second one. And the name of that book is Purpose to Power, and we'll get into it. And he'll share a lot more information about the book with you, because I think it's got some really, really great content, particularly for leaders, leaders that are fully into their career as leaders and upcoming leaders. So there's really, really some great information. And I'll let him tell you all about that in just a moment. But first, let me just remind you that the podcast is sponsored by ExecuRight. At ExecuRight, we help leaders to reach their full potential by getting their words out into the world through books. So if you have a book in your head, your heart, your soul that you want to get out there, head over to our website. It's execuwright.com, or you can email, hook up with us on LinkedIn, Facebook. All of those links are in the show notes. So head over to the show notes and you can get all the information how to reach out to us. I would love to hear from you. Would love to hear your story. All right, so let's jump in. Anthony, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jennifer. Thanks for asking. Doing well.
Nice. So tell us a little about yourself. And how your journey, how you kind of got to, this place right now.
Sure. Well, I guess to start off that, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And yes, it was many moons ago that we worked together, and I remember those days as one of the finest working times of my career. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely, yeah. We had a lot of fun.
We did. We had a ball.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, just generally in working, I think for me, I've always tried to figure out, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, at the time I was a consultant, and one of the sayings of a consultant is, you're a jack of all trades and a master of nothing, right? So for me, it was really, a journey to come to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? So a lot of what I've been about, like becoming a doctor and becoming more focused on purpose, is really about my own journey. So starting as an IT guy, used to be a database administrator and a consultant in IT and in business and e-business, as the term was called back then, to really getting into selling and sales, and to really finding out what it means to be a good leader. And so really my journey in kind of purpose to power and leadership was about how, for me, I could be a better leader, specifically in the context of leading sales teams and leading folks on the job, as well as leading a family. So I got into leadership. I got into really focusing on this concept of purpose in leadership about a decade, maybe about 13 years ago. I was really drawn to it, and I decided to go back and get a doctorate in strategic leadership. And while doing that, I really dove into this concept of purposeful leadership, and how, as we self-actualize and we become our best selves, that we could leverage our own emotional intelligence and that self-actualization of purpose to really, really be a good leader. So really what this book is about is, and what I kind of, intertwine my own journey is, how do I become my best self? How do I find my purpose? And then ultimately for me as a doctor of strategic leadership is, how do I become a great leader and help others to also become great leaders? So, yeah.
I love that. I love your focus on purpose. Purpose has become very meaningful for me Recently, it always has been, but recently it's really become kind of front and center of purpose, authenticity, really kind of making sure that everything I do aligns with who I am. And in order to do that, I really had to kind of understand what my purpose was.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, not funny, but it's like that. I think again, we all share a similar journey, and especially in a world that we live in, where there's so many different um, corporations, people trying to place a purpose on you for the benefit of their pockets, right? So what I found is that it's easy to kind of get sucked up into all the noise, but where you just talked about is being your authentic self and understanding who you are, your core values and principles and beliefs, and then how does that kind of culminate into a purpose is very important, I think, to kind of keep us grounded. And so that's one of the things that I like to talk about, and I talk about in the book as well.
Yeah, so I found the book fascinating. You talk a lot about emotional intelligence. You talk a lot about self-awareness. You talk about really kind of using those and values. I thought the conversation in the book about values was so interesting. So tell us a little bit about the book. So this is your second book. It's called Purpose to Power. And so tell us, what kind of brought you to writing this book?
Yeah. So again, I mentioned earlier, around 2010, I really started getting into leadership for both professional and personal reasons. And as I started reading a lot of books, and I was reading a book called Life on Purpose. I think the author is Brad Swift. I had read Purpose Driven Life. And what I found, and those are great books. I love the concepts, and I love the discussions around purpose. And of course, there are a lot of different books and ways to find information on it. But what I wanted to see is really, is finding the arc of understanding purpose and my purpose through to execution, or to impact, or to making a difference in my daily life and then in the lives of others. So it really kind of culminated, again, over 10 years ago. And I'd say probably around 2015 or so, I was actually out of the country. I was in the islands, and I was on the beach, and just started kind of thinking and writing. And that's when the actual arc of Purpose to Power came to my mind. So it was one of those things where, again, it's a personal story, but I believe it's a story that a lot of other people would be interested in, because it's a process, a framework for not just finding purpose, but then how to live, how to define it in real terms about how you live your life, and even bring your best self to work. So yeah, so it was about 10 years ago or so.
Wow. So when you talk about purpose and talk about all these other things, what are some of the what do you believe are some of the most important concepts that leaders need in order to be, the landscape has changed a lot. It's particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, but it was beginning to change even before that. Culture was changing. People were becoming much more aware of diversity and inclusion and culture, and how do we make the workplace a more fulfilling workplace. So how do you recommend people, what are some of the tips or advice that you give people who are trying to shift into kind of this new idea of what the workplace looks and feels like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and great thought. I mean, your kind of description of how the workplace and the landscape has changed is spot on, at least from what I've seen as well. I really think, it's almost like you've got to meet, like, people are people, right? So people have emotions, they have feelings, and what I think in the old ways of working is it was almost like, your feelings don't matter. You're here to, you have a
Mhm.
position and you're here to get a check, right? I think that paradigm has been kind of turned on its head, particularly with millennials and Generation Z. It's like, they want meaning in what they do, and they want to go to work and work for not just a company that's going to do something great or help the planet or help the world in some way or something they care about, but also a boss, right? They want to come work for someone that actually cares about them and what they are experiencing. They bring their, because there's this blur of like life and work now, right? We're remote, we work in our homes. So how much more could you ask of a person to do, right? To get a check. So really, as a leader, I think what I found to be kind of some of the more important, let's say, characteristics or components of leadership are, I'd say number one is you've got to understand that, your position is not leadership. So your title is not leadership. It doesn't mean anything to a lot of people, right? Positional leadership, bureaucracy is it can only get you so far, may get compliance, but if you lead from that position, you're likely to get resistance, right? So I think that's number one. Secondly, is leadership starts with self-leadership. So if anyone who aspires to be a really, really good leader, a great leader, you've got to really know yourself. You've got to be very self-aware, aware of your own leadership strengths, areas where you may need to improve as a leader, your own emotional intelligence. And when I say emotional intelligence, I mean the full spectrum of emotional self-awareness, self-expression, how you show up to other people. Are you a bull in a china shop, or are you empathetic? Do you have interpersonal relationships? How do you make decisions and problem solve? And how do you tolerate stress? And that's a big one in today's workforce. And that's all a part of emotional intelligence. So I'd say really, knowing that. And then the third part I'd say is really, again, meeting people where they are and trying to listen more than talk. And that's really where you become a leader coach. And one of the biggest things I've seen that can be effective is to really understand, what are people's goals? What do they want? What's their purpose? Help them to define themselves in the context of their work, right? So I think there's a number of things, but I would say the biggest thing is self-awareness, particularly emotional intelligence, and understanding one's own strengths. And that can help you to kind of navigate the rest of it, including coaching and leading other folks where they are.
Yeah, I think emotional intelligence is one of the things that, for me anyway, I've become so much more aware of it, and so much more, especially the last few years. Um, Not necessarily calling it emotional intelligence all the time, but just those skills, and really kind of learning how to. And I think one of the misconceptions that's out there is, for some people, is that a lot of these things are inherent as opposed to learned skills. And so much of that can be learned. I mean, you can improve your emotional intelligence. You can improve your empathy, your self-awareness, sometimes just by becoming aware of it. And just learning what it is and how it works. So, I think you putting that information out there is so helpful, because the more you learn about it, the more you can improve.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I do talk about that in the book, and particularly how we've been a highly IQ driven society, where so when
Right.
you get grades, okay, you got straight A's, good job, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. The challenge with IQ is that it kind of stalls, right? We can take in more information, but we're I think by the time we're in our teenage years, we're as an IQ or intellectually intelligent as we're going to get. EQ, on the other hand, you can continue to change your emotional awareness, your emotional perceptions, your empathy, things that you just talked about. So, and studies show, and this is kind of where, and I think it's really important for people to understand, is that emotional intelligence is actually a much, much larger predictor of success in life,
Right.
at work, in relationships, in, actually earning more money, much more larger predictor than IQ, or, being intelligent or being the smartest person in the room. It's, so I tell people all the time, yes, work on your emotional intelligence. There's several books you can get. I actually give us an emotional intelligence assessment that helps people get a sense of, okay, what is my actual score in these different areas? Am I out of balance in different emotions? Do I have a, low self-regard perhaps, but then high self-expression? So maybe I'm kind of talking out of ways that might make myself feel better, that then kind of shows up in a leadership context, right? So there's a lot of different parts of emotional intelligence that we want to uncover and understand, and sometimes getting, an assessment or even getting a coach to help to, with the transformation of what you want to improve can be helpful as well.
Well, and what's so fascinating about that is you can use emotional intelligence and those other skills to kind of overcome some of the things that you feel may be holding you back. So as an introvert, and a pretty heavy introvert at times, I've learned skills to kind of, but I still have a lot of the introversion kind of foundational stuff. But as an introvert, there were always there were times that I felt like that was kind of, it was holding me back. I wasn't getting to where I wanted to get because of that. Once I started understanding it and understanding things like emotional intelligence and how to use those skills, it kind of helped me to, now I am still more prone to stay at home as opposed to go out to an event. I have to force myself to do that. But, having understood some of these other skills, it's not as exhausting. It's not, I don't feel as left out anymore because I can use these other skills that I've learned to help overcome some of the things that might be holding back by being, kind of a heavy introvert.
That's good. That's really good. And it's funny. Purpose actually, or let's say self-actualization, is a tool of is one of the subcategories of emotional intelligence, right? So being your best self, understanding purpose. And one of the sayings that Stephen Covey, who was, the author of, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, great book, we talk about, people that are successful, have the habit of doing things they don't like to do. But it's because of their purpose, or it's because of their desire to self-actualize, their emotional intelligence that says, okay, I don't feel like doing this, or I don't want to go to this networking event, or I don't want to do that. But it's how do you, to your point, not just use, bad energy, let's just say, but positive energy to pull you towards that. And so it's like, yeah, I'm going to do this because this is going to make me help me to self-actualize, or help me to become a better person. Or if you are high in social responsibility, which is another emotional intelligence category, I am going to make an impact on people today. I'm going to help someone feel better about themselves, right? That's all positive energy, if you will, positive emotions. And so, yes, you're spot on. You can use emotional intelligence to get you to do what you may not feel like doing, but also keep it in a positive, emotional, and energetic context. So, great point.
That's such a great way to put it. And I never really thought about it quite like that. But if I do think about it, those times that I do kind of get past my desire to just, sit at home and read, it's because whatever I'm going to, whatever is aligned with what my purpose is. I need to go out and I need to meet new people. I need to, there's something in it that feeds and aligns with what I'm trying to do. And if it doesn't, I will choose not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never thought about it quite like that way, but that is my thought process when I'm trying to make the decision to participate or not. And then there's always those things that, okay, you got to do it. So, and then you just sort of suck it up and go. But yeah, so gonna switch topics just a little bit, because one of the things we do with this podcast is we talk about the process of writing the book. So I'm very interested in your process. And one of the themes that we have right now for the next few episodes is the process of getting started, because then for a lot of people that's the hardest part. So tell us a little bit about how what made you decide to write this particular book? What is your purpose in it? What is your why? And how did you have challenges with getting started? And if you did, how did you kind of overcome them? Do you have tools that you use? Or any advice you want to give?
Yeah. Wow. So yes, of course I had challenges. What would life be without them? So I think kind of, my why or my purpose. So first of all, my purpose is to help other people to find their purpose and to be the best leaders of themselves, their, families, their teams, their organizations, their communities, even at a societal level, depending on your level of influence. So it's really that, that's been with me for the, let's say, past 13, 14 years, just kind of having that set in me. The reason I wrote this book, I'm gonna kind of go out into the future, then I'm gonna come back.
Okay.
And I talk about this in the book, is purpose in picture. So I kind of knew, or I had this vision, if you will, that as I have this purpose of creating, let's just say, purposeful leaders, to make it short, that it was going to be a lifelong event. There was no way I'm going to, year two, just going to have all the content I need. That's everything that's kind of going on in my head, that I'm going to be able to express everything. So I knew that this is something that's going to be, God willing, decades long activity, right? So for me, the book was actually kind of conceptually thought of as a foundational element towards that vision. And I have a company called Lead Strong, and within Lead Strong, Purpose to Power is a course that I teach, but it's like a foundational course for purpose. And then once you kind of get this, the foundations, then you can start to work into, other leadership characteristics and competencies and emotional intelligence, and then finally kind of mastering influence. So for me, this was very much a foundational piece. And yes, it was very challenging to get started. One of the toughest things. So number one, I would just say, you got to know your why. You got to know your purpose for writing the book. And my purpose was to not only just fulfill my purpose, but also to have it serve as a foundational element in the arc of my purposeful life, if you will. Right. So you asked the question, what are the challenges, and what did I kind of deal with? So just getting started was a challenge. And for me, I'm a big thinker, I do the Gallup Strengths Finder. I coach that as well. And one of the things that my first strength is strategic. So I think I tend to think bigger, and perhaps, sometimes too big, because it kind of can distort reality. But I had all these thoughts in my head, and the thing you just got to start doing, or what I started doing, is just write. Pick a time, or have tools around you, whether it's an iPad or a notebook. I have several journals. Anything that you can write with, just start writing. Just write it down. And that's what I did. I started just writing ideas for the first probably couple of years. And then I'd say around 2017, it was kind of these waves. 2017, I started um, target a more specific time to actually sit down and write. And I was kind of going back and forth between time and number of pages. Okay, I'm going to get 5 pages done today, or 3 pages, or I'm just going to sit down for 3 hours and do these things called pomodoros, which are like these 25-minute sprints. And I think I do five at a time. So at least like 2.5 hours of writing. But it wasn't until 2020, it was during the pandemic, when I started getting really focused. And for me, it was actually, I had a coach I was working with who was holding me accountable. Like, hey, how many, what are you going to do this week? Like, how many pages are you going to write, or how much time are you going to spend? And so that really helped. That accountability. It doesn't have to be a coach, but just having somebody to hold you accountable to what you say you're going to do, and remind you of the why. So the coach would remind me of why I said I wanted to write the book in the first place, because it's like anything. The closer to the finish line you get, the harder it gets. It's hard to start, but it's harder to finish, so at least for me. So yeah, I would say that last piece of advice is that accountability that really helped me.
So thank you so much for kind of explaining it that way. I really appreciate the fact that this has been a lengthy process for you. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, well, I wanted to get my book done in 6 months and it didn't happen, so maybe I'm just not going to do it. And I think people put kind of unrealistic goals on themselves, especially with this kind of work. Creative work is such mind work. And sometimes the ideas have to come as they come. And I love the fact that you allowed it to flow as it did. I also love the idea of having a coach, and that can come in a lot of different ways. You can have a friend that's, kind of helps you and have, regular conversations. You can, there's lots of people out there that you can find as accountability partners, accountability coaches that you can work with, on that. There's lots of ways to do it, but I do think it is important to have someone that's kind of someone that you can talk to about it. Someone, that kind of understands what you're, I love the fact that you talked about how the accountability coach sort of reminded you of why you're doing this. And it's important to have that kind of support. It's not always easy to get that kind of support from the closest people in your life, from your family. Sometimes even your friends don't necessarily understand everything. So it's important to kind of find someone, or another writer. If you can find another writer, that's I encourage people all the time to find writing partners. And there's a process that I use that where you just sit together and write. You're not necessarily working on the same thing. You just sit, and there's something very powerful in doing that. Just having that other person, you kind of feel the energy. So those are really great tips, and hearing about how you kind of got through that. Did you ever run into, you did mention like toward the end, did you ever run into really kind of what they call like writer's block, or kind of that limiting belief kind of challenge that a lot of people run into when they're trying to do something like this?
I did. And it's funny you mentioned, the energy of another person, like a writer, co-writer, someone you can write with, even if you're writing different things. I actually I'm a big beach person, from, Eastern Shore of the United States. So it's like, I'm really big into seeing the water. I would also like trees and nature. So when I would get kind of stuck and it would either come in stuck in concepts or stuck in just the exact, what words should I say next? I will go in nature. I mean, that to me was the biggest pick me up, if you will, because if you think about it, when you're in a house or in an office, the walls are closed in.
Yeah.
When you're outside, it's infinite, right? So for me, it just really allowed me to think and to be able to continue. And yeah, I'd say that. And then the second thing is sometimes you know, just by writing, even if you're not writing about the subject. So for me, I would journal, like try to do it like at least 3 or 4 days a week. And I would start with different topics, but you know, the biggest one is gratitude, you know, really
Mhm.
kind of journaling about what I was thankful for often opened the door for other avenues of thought, because sometimes you mentioned like self-limiting, you know, beliefs. Sometimes our writing reflects our mood. And so, you know, gratitude journaling has been shown to lift our moods as part of what they call positive psychology, and being able to improve subjective well-being. So being able to improve your mood can actually improve the writing. So that's where the outdoors, the sand between the toes, the gratitude journaling comes, you know. So that's one of the things that really helped me to break through those moments when I had writer's block. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, for new writers or for people who've been doing it for a while, and maybe, and this probably even gets into some of the stuff you talk about in your book, the emotional intelligence, the self-awareness. A lot of those skills are great skills for writers to have as well.
mhm.
So what is your best piece of advice for a new writer or someone who's trying to um, really kind of get their book, past the finish line? And so what's maybe your best piece of advice for someone like that?
Hmm.
I mean, I'm putting you on the spot.
It's cool. I mean, I think you know, I'll reiterate I think knowing your why is
Yeah.
the most important, in my opinion. Just you know, if most people are drawn towards growth, especially if you write, you're drawn towards um expressing yourself. So knowing why you're doing that, I think, is the number one. The second thing I would just say, just try to work on it every day, and understand that it's a journey. It's not a sprint. It's a race of endurance. It will test you, but just write. Just write. Don't worry about getting it perfect. But if you're a new writer, just keep writing and do not worry about um how you feel people will, you know, think about what you're writing. Don't get caught up in a negative kind of, you know, in your mind about, oh, no one's going to like this, or no one's going to read this, or why am I doing this? Because that can often happen. Just stay on the track. Let the train of creativity and flow state just take over, and just keep writing. And then you'll get to a point where, you know, with editors and other things like that, where you can always kind of go back and make some changes or tweaks, but just have the confidence that you can, you know, your why. You have the confidence that you can actually be a writer. Anybody can do it. It's just a matter of wanting it. And so have that confidence and just write every day.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I love that. And I love the idea that everybody can do it. I have so many people tell me, oh, yeah, I'm not a very good writer. And first of all, I tell them, I'm sure, I promise you, you're better than you think you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's such great advice. And very encouraging as well. So tell us about, what else do you have going on? You have anything new that you're working on? Any upcoming books, any new books, or anything else that you're working on?
Yeah, the biggest thing I'm working on right now. So my day job, or what I do, my purpose and work actually is again, I mentioned earlier, Lead Strong. So my website, leadstrong.net. So I do leadership coaching. I have coaching clients, individual clients, and groups as well, and then on-site and virtual training. So I'm kind of I consider myself a leadership consultant in a lot of ways, where I can understand what's going on with the company, talk to some of their leaders, and figure out how and where a leadership needs to be improved in order to reach certain goals or improve team performance, improve employee engagement, things of that nature. So right now I'm really focused on uh, getting the company stronger, getting building more clients. And one of the things I'm working on right now also are online courses. So what I'm able to do is take a lot of from what's in the this book. I have again, I mentioned earlier, I do workshops on emotional intelligence, have a workshop focused around influence and improving and mastering your leadership to improve engagement. And there's some studies around motivation and some practices around that I really focus in on, of which purposes is one of them, but really transforming a lot of my materials online so that I can offer on-demand online courses and augment those with group coaching. And I think that's probably one of the things I've seen to be most effective, is being able to allow people to learn at their own pace, but then be in those groups to hold, to have accountability, to have focus around application of what you're learning so that it becomes experiential and it becomes sustainable long-term. So really this next season, if you will, I'm focused on building the online courses and really growing my business. And then I have some thoughts about some things I want that I want to write about perhaps towards the second half of the year that I'll get to, but not there yet. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. So so to the audience, highly recommend checking Anthony out. Anthony is definitely one of the smartest people I've worked with, and he's got some great stuff going on right now. So if you're interested in improving leadership skills, and leadership skills aren't necessarily just for like the VPs, and leadership skills are for everybody. So definitely, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're someone who's working for another company, so check out his stuff. He's got some great stuff out there. Also check out his book. It's called Purpose to Power: Your Journey to a Life of Meaning, Fulfillment, and Impact. It's a great read. So I definitely recommend it. We'll put the link to Anthony's website, the link to his book in the show notes. So, go out and check those out. One more question, Anthony, before we wrap up. And I always ask this question because I always love to hear the answer. What do you have any books that have inspired you? You already mentioned a couple about purpose. Any other books that you recommend to people to read? Anything that's inspired you through the years? You have a couple of books. I can see them there on your shelf. So I think you read a little bit.
A little bit. Oh wow, yeah. I mean, and so as you can tell, I do like to read, and I've read some pretty inspiring stuff. I mean, I kind of go back to some of the basics, and I'd say there's the nonfiction category, obviously, which I write about as well. So I'd say Think and Grow Rich would be my, if I had to choose one book on the spot, I think that'd be it. Just because it's an older text, it's written by Napoleon Hill. It was early 1900s, and I think there's some basics and some kind of what I'd say blossoming psychology and concepts that were brought into work and brought into kind of daily practice that I say is still relevant to this day. So that'd be the first. And then I'm a big Paulo Coelho fan. So a couple books, I'd say The Fifth Mountain, that was very inspiring as well. And Paulo tells these stories, but integrates kind of these principles and these lessons in them. And I think that those have been very powerful as well. So those would be the two, Think and Grow Rich, and then anything by Paulo Coelho, perhaps The Fifth Mountain. That would be my two thoughts on books.
Nice. Now, Think and Grow Rich is just one of those classics that I've been hearing a lot of people talking about it lately. And it's one of those kind of standards that people go back to. And it's It's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, definitely read it. I'm not familiar with Paulo. I'm gonna have to check those books out. I haven't. That's a new author to me.
Yeah, I think he's Brazilian or it's international, but his books have been translated into like 85 languages or something. So he's definitely inspiring. So yeah, let me know what you think.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely check them out. I'll add it to I always have a stack of books. It's like, okay, those are the next ones I'm gonna read. So my goal this year is 50 books. So I'm working through that right now. So it's just such a great thing to do. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony. I have enjoyed this conversation. This is you sparked quite a few things for me in the conversation as well. So I love it. I think the readers, the audience will really enjoy it as well. So I appreciate you joining me here today. Enjoy the rest of your week, and to the audience, check out all the stuff that we talked about. All the links and everything is in the show notes. And I appreciate you listening. Please go out and, leave us a review. We would love to hear what you have to say, or reach out on social media. Like I said, I love hearing stories. So if you have a great story to tell, I'd love to hear it. So, and this has been The Author's Way. Thank you so much for listening. I think that was a great conversation with Anthony, and if you're listening at this point, you heard all of it. So it was great conversation about leadership. He gave us some really good insights on publishing or getting started, working through some of those challenges that we all have. If you're not familiar, which a lot of people are now, but if you aren't familiar with the concepts of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and leadership, check those concepts out, and definitely pick up his book. He's it's very well written. It has some really great concepts in it, and I've really enjoyed reading it. So a great recommendation for that. So thank you for being a listener, and please go out and leave us a review. Would love to hear what you have to say. And if you can, please leave a 5-star review. That helps get us out to a larger audience. So I really appreciate you all. We are now almost a year in with this podcast, and I so appreciate the readers, and sincerely would love to have you reach out to me. I'd love to hear ideas for a podcast, ideas if you know any authors, if you know any aspiring authors, would love to have conversations with them. So enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy your week, enjoy your life. And I will be talking to you next time. Thank you.